Possibly the most anticipated Marvel movie of the year, I would say, came out this last week, and the numbers are good. The movie is also long, and it does pay a nice tribute to an actor who's become legendary in his own right. This was Wakanda Forever, and I definitely watched it. So, without giving away my glowing review, what did you people think of this movie?
Where do you want to start? I'll let you go, first, Angelina, because you're new to the show. I know
Yeah.
you have a lot to say, probably, I'm assuming, but go ahead.
Uh, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm probably gonna have a kinder review than you two might. In general, I was really happy with the tribute that they did pay to Chadwick Boseman. I think Marvel was really challenged with how to replace the main character in a way that moves forward, but also sort of honors Chadwick and his passing. Um, in general, I feel like as an actor, losing Chadwick Boseman felt really heavy in the community. I think he was gearing up to be like the next Denzel Washington. And I think he was just an incredible actor and an incredible human. He was already giving back so much to the whole of the community and everything in that sense. Like, I think we lost him way too early. So I feel like how they chose to honor him both during, prior to, and after the movie was really really wonderful. But then also just the movie in general, I think it wasn't bad. I liked it. I did
Really?
cry at the end.
Oh
Yeah,
my.
I cried at. Am I allowed to give away spoilers? I mean, that's
Yeah. Oh
fine,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, oof. Um, yeah, the kid got me because he
Yeah.
kind of looked like Chadwick Boseman. They
That's what
did pretty
everybody's
good on the
saying.
casting. And
Yeah.
I didn't cry before that. I felt like, oh man, like heavy. My heart was heavy, but the kid at the end, they did a good job with casting, and that brought on the tears. I was like, oh no.
That
And
was a
just in
really
general, like,
I would have been okay if that had been the only tribute. I thought the stuff at the beginning, considering that they redid the entire Marvel intro with just him and it was quiet. So it was like you had to feel that going into the movie. And then the first 15, 20 minutes of the actual movie is dealing with the death. You see the mural of his face on the wall. There's a funeral. There's sort of this celebration, which was beautiful to watch and like really
mhm.
exciting. And I will say the movie itself was a spectacle and beautifully shot, really cool. But I thought, this is getting in the way of whatever story is here. And when I finished the movie, when it was over, I was like, what really happened? And I don't know if anything actually did because the fight started, but it never really ended. They said, why don't we just not fight? And we I don't know. I feel like we existed more in these worlds, but I didn't really learn anything. And I
I
thought,
think going yeah, see, going into the movie, I think ultimately I kind of knew it was going to have to act as a transition period for the Black Panther franchise. And so I kind of walked into that sort of knowing that that was going to just, that's what it has to be, right? You're transitioning from one lead to the next. It's going
yeah,
to act as a transition movie. I think in general, anyone who has sort of an idea of like how the storylines are going to work and how films are sort of laid out, they would know that too. And so looking at it as that is, I think it acted just as that. It's a transitional movie
okay, but
for the
I'm gonna
next
push
three
back there
movies.
because it's like this was supposed to be the end of phase four. This was supposed to be grand finale, big, and there was the fight anticlimactic, the actual falling action, like it didn't really give me any indication of what's coming next outside of a new Black Panther. But
Yeah.
I really gotta say, the what's her name? Julia Louis Dreyfus character really bugged me.
Oh
I
yeah,
just don't
the
need it.
Allegra
I
de
didn't
Fontaine, the Kit Kat,
all
the
of
Hershey chocolate bar, the
all of
whatever.
those
Her
scenes.
incredibly long name. Yeah.
Yeah, and the purple forelock, that really did not help things in her case. Yeah, that was obnoxious. Those scenes did not have to be in the movie
Those
at
two
all.
characters
Yeah.
did not need to be in the movie.
No,
Totally unnecessary. Yeah.
no. Uh,
I mean, I think it acted sort of as a connector from the US to Wakanda, right? But I think it could have been like a mere phone call kind of
yeah,
situation. I don't think it needed to be more than it was. Yeah.
did I
But
have to know
also,
about like their love life and like all like it did not add anything for me.
yeah, I have to kind of agree with you there. I think the movie was likely longer than it should have
Yeah,
been.
yeah,
I, yeah, you look at all other like 2.5 hour movies and you're looking at these like incredible epic movies, like just movies that last throughout time.
yeah.
We're talking
And
like Titanic. This wasn't one of those. You're right.
on that note, the trailer for this movie and the concept that we're going to go underwater, that was all really reminiscent of all the hype around the new Avatar movie coming out.
Mm.
And
It literally reminded me of Avatar. As
it
I'm
was the
watching
same.
this movie,
Yeah,
I'm like, blue people,
yeah.
Avatar.
Blue people underwater. And it was like, this is even the trailers, the teaser trailers were very similar. They were instrumental, no dialogue, just images. And, I really got to take issue with this. I will fine. They're mutants. They can breathe underwater. How do they hear each other?
I mean, I think that is different. I don't know. I think
No,
that's one of those things
you
you
can
don't.
change. I get it. You can write the science fiction that the biology has changed and they've mutated to be able to breathe underwater. Fine.
Not all of them even had
Sound.
blue skin, even though they said only Namor was different. But then when you go into Talokan, like there's some of the people
Yeah,
that Shuri sees, they'd have like normal color skin, versus
I
like the
did have a
people who
question
are
about that.
fighting have all blue skin.
And I'll say, like the underwater sequence with the music and they're showing you the whole cityscape, that won me over. I was
Yeah.
kind of enchanted by
Although
that.
I will say this, that's the one area where I know, because it's a natural comparison to what DC did with Aquaman, but in the world where the Aquaman movie exists, even though this movie took a much more realistic approach to how an underwater society, like what it would look like, there was like all kinds of like any kind of metallic structure, or it looked like there was they looked aged, and it had like algae
Yeah.
growing in places. It didn't look super clean. It didn't look super bright. I like that it was a more realistic approach to that. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I think when you look at that and compare to like, because that's where my mind went, I was like, but like that Aquaman movie did some of that too. But oh my God, there was some incredible wonder. And then when you have seen
Yeah.
that before, it's hard for me to look at this and be awed in the same way that Avatar or Aquaman tried to awe you with just the spectacle
Well,
of what those underwater
it definitely
societies were like.
sets a bar for reference to see
Yes.
what can be
Which
done
is an
with
unfair
underwater.
comparison. I mean, on its own, was
Well, it's
great,
not an unfair
but
comparison. They're
But
coming out right at the same time.
did you all notice that some of the actors in the background of those water scenes do look like they are holding their breath and struggling a little bit? I wanted to know how they filmed it. And I can only imagine that they had to have filmed it in some sort of tank, right?
Probably.
Some of the scenes.
it's probably a
But some of
combination.
those actors look like they're struggling. And I'm like, I
I don't even think
I
they
don't know
probably
if
shot it in water. That's just
you
to me
don't
like
think
looks like
so?
visual. I don't think so. I mean, okay, look, we didn't spend enough time in there. Okay, so the parts where they're like exploring like what Talokan's capital city looks like, which by the way, can I just sidetrack a little bit?
Yeah.
The whole country of Wakanda and Talokan seem like they're not even nation states, they're like city states, because
Okay.
of how tiny they are. But anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
But when you're in there exploring, and I think they're running across people who are just like, or not running, swimming across people who are like the kids, for example, that come up to Shuri, and then they're like sort of swimming. I think those parts were probably filmed in water, because it's
Yeah,
just like
because you can see the
it's
hair.
easier.
But
Yeah.
to your point
Although they
about
probably
them looking like
replace
they
all
were
the hair. That's all CG. I
maybe,
can guarantee you they replaced the hair in at least half of those underwater shots. But like I
but they
think like
they
the
do
throne
just
room stuff was probably not
they
underwater.
distract you from the the physical reality of it all with music that plays over everything. So you don't talk to those people who
Yeah, I
swim
wish
up
we
to you.
did.
And,
But
right?
like,
And she's there wearing this scuba diving suit because the pressure will crush her bones, but not his, and not anybody else's down there.
yeah,
And
because they literally apparently
Well,
the whole
mm,
society like is ingesting vibranium and that protects them. I think that was the inference. Is that?
they really,
did they?
they really didn't flesh out the reality of this.
Yeah,
And
I was like,
the
did they
more I
ever
think about
say
it,
that?
the
Yeah,
more I
it
think
brings
about
up more
this,
questions.
everything underwater, I'm just like, that didn't make any sense at all. And really, the sound bothered me the most because I was like, they put a filter on the voice, and it's like, it's a little hard to hear you underwater. And it's like that. I've tried to talk underwater when I was a kid. That's not what it sounds like. A lot more bubbles.
But
Sound doesn't travel.
it's a mutant. Like, come on. They
Yeah,
just
but
I think that is like
you
not
know
even
what?
what bothered me the most about the movie. The villain himself, I can't even what was his name? It was like
Well,
Kokan or something.
he
Well,
he called himself Namor, and
well,
everybody else
no, no,
called
no,
him
no.
Namor.
His people called him Kukul Khan, and
Kukulkan,
then
yeah.
his enemies called him Namor, which actually I thought that the clever thing they did was how he got named Namor by his enemy, because like when the Spanish conquistadors,
Yeah.
it's sort of like
That was
without
my
love. Because like last week on the show, I was talking about like the way they're saying Namor as opposed to like
Mhm.
with the rolling R's like Namor. It
Yeah,
kind of sounds like like a telenovela character
yeah.
name. And then like the origin of the name in the movies that comes from Spanish language of like, to be with somebody without love or can't be loved, something to that effect. I was like, that makes all the sense in the world. That was kind of clever what they did there. So
I'll give him that. That whole sequence of his backstory was probably my favorite part of the whole movie. That was like some
But I
good
didn't like
storytelling.
him. I
Well, he
don't
was the
think he's a
villain, wasn't he?
strong. Yeah, I don't. But not
You didn't
even.
even like hate
I
him.
actually,
don't like him.
I
No,
disagree
I
with that.
don't think he's a strong enough villain to last the next 2-3 movies.
I don't think
Like
he
I think
will.
they intend for him to
I
be.
think
I get
they
I get
totally
the
built
feeling
him
this
up
was
to
a
be that.
one-off.
I
Didn't
don't think he's a strong character, like him himself. Like I don't think he's a strong enough actor to sort of make me hate him. I just don't like him. I'm just like,
Yeah, they also
I'm
cut off the
not.
wing on his foot, so I don't
I
know
had a very
really
different
what he
How
can
is
perspective.
do
it
Okay,
gonna
anymore.
happen?
can I just take a few seconds to kind of give you guys like my overall thoughts on this, because
Please, yeah.
I've been ruminating on this since, because like I went and saw it with my it was like a sibling trip, so like with my brother and sister we got together, we are like, all right, like I think this is the first time we've done anything like that in like a long time. So we went and saw this together, and obviously like I mentioned before the show, well, to the people watching, this was like an 11 p.m. showing for me, so I was trying to like make sure that I'm staying awake and paying attention. But the movie starts and it's really powerful in the beginning because you see them pay tribute. But I had a problem with the first scene to begin, like, because that scene seemed like it was contrived way to set up how they bring the herb back down the road, and a means for us to start caring about how Shuri directly failed to save T'Challa. But then for the majority of the movie, we totally forgot about that until the third act. She has to become the Black Panther. They kind of revert back to that setup earlier. Then throughout the course of the movie, I think when I walked out of the movie theater, I was like, the overwhelming thought in my mind was, what was missing in this movie was the deft touch of storytelling and the narrative focus that the first movie had. Where if you want to describe the first movie in a couple of sentences, you could say it was about T'Challa coming back and becoming a king, and then realizing that his own father wasn't exactly the good man that he thought he was, and then dealing with a problem where his own cousin was trying to take down and change what Wakanda was. That's what the first movie was about. This
Mhm.
movie was about it was about making Shuri the new Black Panther and giving her the same character journey that T'Challa had in the first movie, which was weird because she doesn't start in the same spot that T'Challa does in the first movie from where their character is. She's not a very
No.
likable character, and unfortunately throughout the
I
movie she doesn't make that jump. And
Well,
just
who
a
was the
list of,
likable character in this movie?
I actually like Namor like by the end of the movie more, because he basically, okay, I'll get into it. Hold on one second. So this was about Shuri. Then the whole when the General Okoye gets fired by Ramonda, it was like a total like that. It was completely illogical because of how their relationship has been portrayed up until this
I
point.
gotta say,
I was like,
I
whoa.
don't like Ramonda.
And that
I
was
thought that whole
contrived
performance
because
was
they
so
wanted to make her
melodramatic.
like the newest Wakandan Iron Man with the vibranium suit down the road, so they can have more characters to kill off in Secret Wars. And then when it comes to the rest of the story, I think M'Baku was underused. The best scene in the movie was when he comes in and heckle. I love when they're like who, like they're heckling the other people in that room. I
Yeah.
was like, and then he's eating a carrot, like he gives no shit because like nobody can
He's
touch him.
definitely the comedic relief character in this
Yeah, but
movie,
I was
and
like,
there
why
wasn't
make him
enough
just
of it.
that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then the way that, okay, there's a couple of absolute moral dilemmas this movie poses. One moral dilemma is this idea of Namor says he comes back. He's like, I'm gonna be back next week, and you will fight with me in this war against the surface world, or I will wipe you, Wakanda, off the face of this planet. That right there is such a powerful moral dilemma that they completely fumble the rest of the way in the movie because of how they actually like resolve it. And then the whole Riri Williams Ironheart storyline did not need to be there. Like you said, Allegra de Fontaine and the other CIA agent, the Martin Freeman character, those scenes were complete. If you cut them out, I wouldn't like notice a difference.
Yeah,
like, literally.
nothing happens. Yeah,
And then like at the end of the fight, like throughout the movie, we have this thing about these two cultures fighting each other, that like they fight with honor. Like, you know, the blue big dude on the bridge, like, pick up your weapon, Yokoya, before like when she loses it, and they're like, I want to fight you and beat you with your weapon in your hand. Only to like at the end, like Shuri is like, Wakanda forever, and like literally is helpless, defenseless. Namor burns his back to the point where he's basically dead. And I'm like, I like Namor at this point better than you, because you clearly are too dark.
In that last scene where they're fighting, she like gets the pole jabbed through her stomach. I literally laughed out loud.
How did she not die?
2 seconds. When 2
You
seconds
did not
later,
in the theater.
when she, oh yeah, when she 2 seconds later, after getting impaled, does this big flip and like is able to fight him, and I was like, I could not help it. I let out a big old guffaw right there, because I was just like, this movie has been so unrealistic, and that was the icing on the cake for me.
Yeah.
One more note.
Yeah. You go for it.
And this is the last thing I'm going to say about the underwater speaking thing. Really, it really bugged me. Brilliant opportunity to do sign language. They totally missed that.
Oh, yeah.
Why? We could have had an entire. I mean, you want to talk about inclusivity in movies? The deaf community would really appreciate some representation underwater. That could have been a slam dunk for them. They totally missed it, and instead they gave us, I can't really hear you that well, and that was annoying. That was annoying to me.
Oh no.
Okay.
I honestly, Lupita Nyong'o's character, I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly.
I think so.
I think out of all of the characters, I loved hers the most. I would have
criminally
preferred to
underused.
see her more.
Yeah,
like
so underused.
She is so beautiful. She is such an incredible actress. She like really draws your eyes, and I want to root for her.
Yeah.
The whole way through. And then we only get little snippets of her, and I'm hoping that we'll get to see more of her in the next movies, especially as I'm sure these reviews like sort of roll out and people will talk about that. But I'm like, she's this badass assassin. Like, she could have helped you this whole time.
Yeah.
And y'all are really just struggling in the lab half this time. Also, the scientist.
The Riri Williams or Shuri?
No, the young
girl?
one at
The
MIT.
student.
The 19-year-old
Yeah,
girl.
I mean,
Riri Williams.
she was.
Honestly,
Yeah,
there was
like-
not much of a plot to this aside from
They were
we might
just
fight with
backdoor
this other
piloting her
nation.
show in the movie. That's all it was. Like,
It's
Yeah.
this was, and that's why I kind of I disagree with the way, why attach a tribute to Chadwick Boseman to something so disjointed and so all over the place, and something that at the end of the day, what I will say, was underwhelming as a sequel and as a capstone on phase 4 of the MCU. I'm a little disappointed.
I look at movies, my philosophy is when I walk out of the theater, the overwhelming feeling that I have, basically, because the thing is, people consume content and most people are broad strokes like, what did you think you're probably thinking like one or two very specific things, and or like overall like opinion of the movie when you walk out. When I walked out of the first Black Panther, I was like, this is such a wonderful world, and they told
Yeah.
the most morally brave story. Like I'll compare the first Black Panther to what Logan did, what the Dark
Mm.
Knight did, where they set up a moral dilemma for the characters, and then they did not shy away from making the hard choices at the end of the movie. This movie sets up a couple of moral dilemmas, like the dilemma of, do we hand over this one 19-year-old girl and save millions of people, I'm assuming millions of people in Wakanda, and like a larger conflict in the world, or do we choose to say like basically, for the greater good, I guess. And then the other one is, the more is like, you will fight with me or you will die. And so
Mm.
that's decisions that leaders have to make, and this movie completely fumbles both of those moral dilemmas by the end of it, whereas those previous movies I mentioned, they face it head on, with like Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger dying at the end of Black Panther, and how beautiful and how tragic, and you were like, there was no easy decision at the end of the movies, so you appreciate that the filmmakers made the one that maybe they felt was the best in the moment. And that's what, like, when I walked away from those movies, I was like, yeah. And you're thinking about like, how would you solve this problem as a screenwriter? You're writing this, you're like, yeah, there was
Yeah.
no easy decision. This movie
So
completely fumbles that.
So let's, before we wrap everything up, can we take a look at just the numbers? I want to know, like, how's it
Oh
doing?
yeah.
What's the critical response been? Because all I really know at this point is what I thought of it, and yeah, now you do too. So, what are we looking at here in terms of box office numbers and review scores?
Yeah, so Rotten Tomatoes, it's 84% right now, 311 critic reviews, 95% audience rating with over 5,000 verified ratings. So by and large, people are liking it. Now, I did read some of the reviews. The good ones are also noticed saying some of the same things about like what we critique there, but I think where they vary from the people who gave it a rotten review, which there's far fewer of. Those people point out more of like the structural, the plotting, the screenwriting, whereas the people who really liked it were like, I love the Chadwick Boseman tribute. This feels like a good next step moving the MCU story forward. I just, I personally just thought like the story, this movie prioritized plot and moving the MCU story forward over like telling a good Wakandan story. So
I
yeah,
would definitely agree with that. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and I'm glad you do.
Yeah.
75% top critics, so a lower score for the top critics, which I look at
Mhm.
that score because to me that's important, because those top critics are the ones who are the most respected and have the probably the longest and the best track records, and a larger percentage of them, relatively speaking, didn't give it as good of a score. This is a crowd pleaser of a movie simply because of the way it starts and the way it ends. And they tell you like in movie, like, there was that what was that Nick Cage movie where he actually meets Robert McKee, Adaptation, where he says like, you can basically mess up the entire film, but if you wow them in the end, you've got a hit. People will forgive anything. Unfortunately for me, this movie doesn't end the right way. And then even that post-credit scene to me was like, oh, Kevin Feige just wants to make sure that, long after he's gone, this MCU has like 3 generations worth of superheroes ready, so that, they gave Chadwick Boseman, which felt a little, I'm like, I hate it when you tell me plot by dialogue. And they did a lot of that in this movie at the beginning when they were talking about how T'Challa dies and how we're meant to feel about how they're feeling about it in mourning. I just thought that should have started with the funeral scene. Don't give me anything before that. Just start with the funeral. That's powerful. Go to the logo, start the story. And at the end, what they did was, I think, oh, fine. Anyway, box office, you can see on the screen right now, 180 million, which Angelina, you pointed out, and as the article says, is a record for November. So
Yeah.
can you give us an idea of like what that means in context of like what was the record holder before and why this matters?
Yeah, I think you mentioned before Hunger Games was holding that record, right?
I think it was Hunger Games Catching Fire. So a Lionsgate movie, which
Yeah.
Lionsgate does not have a ton of record-holding
And a
movies across
sequel,
the
right?
box office. Catching Fire was the second movie, I think, right?
Yeah.
I think it
November.
was.
It's a good month for sequels. Take note,
Yeah.
movie makers.
So 180 million is what we're looking at the Sunday AM update, so this may change and move up or down, but 180 million falls right between where they were projecting. So they were projecting somewhere between 175 to 200 million, and so it falls right in the middle. The first Black Panther opened at like 202 million, so this is definitely lower than that,
Yeah.
but it's right within the projection number. So like people are going to look at it and say, okay, you know what, let's see what this does in the weeks to come. It's like, what kind of legs is it going to have? Is it going to 2.5x it, or that opening weekend number, or two, which basically means it's going to double it, or 2.5, times it. The international debut was a little lower because it's not playing as well internationally as the first Black Panther did. Not by much. I mean, 150 million is still good. So when you combine those two numbers of 180 domestic and 150 international, you're looking at a 330 plus million debut, which is fantastic. But we also had similar numbers for Doctor Strange 2, and even Thor Love and Thunder did similar numbers. The problem with those movies were they petered out before they got to the $1 billion mark. And Doctor Strange 2 got pretty close, but it didn't get there. So my concern is that if this movie doesn't, because I feel like a lot of the problems we pointed out, people won't notice on the first watch as much, but if you go and watch this movie 2 or 3 times, you will notice those more and more. So I don't know how well this is going to play. Plus, the other thing is this, those other 2 Marvel movies from earlier this year, they're fun. I mean, yeah, Doctor Strange 2 gets pretty dark at times, but they're relatively fun to watch. So you can sit through those and watch maybe 3 or 4 times in the theater. I don't know. I mean, and the first Black Panther 2 was exactly that kind of movie. You can watch it many times. I don't know
I
if
will
you can
also
sit through
I would
say
and
not
watch
go
that,
this
back
many times.
and watch this again.
some
Yeah.
of the revenue from this is the fact that you're paying, $5 extra to watch it in 3D. And if there's
IMAX.
one more thing I
Yeah.
can berate this movie for, is that I put on the 3D glasses and it was so dark and it wasn't adding anything. I mean, every time I put on the 3D glasses, I literally, it felt like I was just wearing sunglasses in the theater and I couldn't see anything. So
Oh,
I'm
Los Angeles.
I was underwhelmed with the 3D. If you're gonna go see this movie, just see it as a regular 2D on the screen movie, because it's just it's not worth the extra money.
Yeah, I saw it in Adobe Prime, or no, not Prime, Adobe Cinema, which is, I guess, like a version of the premium format they have, which is it's a great format. Unfortunately, the seats when they recline back, they don't quite recline back all the way. So that was, to me, I was like, I don't know, it could be more comfortable.
Yeah. Well, so
Anyway,
final call on
yeah.
this. Was it a worthy sequel to Black Panther, in your opinion?
I thought this was underwhelming and rather disappointing sequel because, like I mentioned before, this movie tries to do way too much, whereas the first movie had a very good focus, like narrative focus. So larger MCU plot and moves forward, yes, in that sense I guess it's okay because this movie connects to the larger MCU more than most Phase 4 projects have. But as a sequel, direct sequel to the previous film, I could have used a lot more than what this movie ultimately gave me. And then some
Yeah.
of what it gave me, it could have done a better job with. So
What it felt like to me, if it was like a move on a chessboard, it's like when you're 3 moves away from checkmate and you just start to play with pawns on the side. It wasn't a meaningful move in terms of advancing the plot or character development. It was really just sort of a, let's just keep the game going a little bit longer.
Yeah, like as I said before, I think it ultimately was just a big transitional movie. And I think maybe their biggest mistake was making it a transitional movie versus like the sequel to Black Panther.
Well, I think that puts a pretty good cap
that's a
on
very
it.
kind way of putting it. I
Yeah.
like how you're just like, yeah,
I told you I was going to be nicer than you
Okay.
guys. Sorry.
Yeah, well, we needed somebody a bit nicer. we've been a little brutal lately, but if you're going to go and see this movie, tell us what you think. Tell us if you agree. Tell us if you have some other alternative to talking underwater that makes a lot more sense, because I'm dying to know. And in the meantime, comment, like, subscribe, be our friend, be part of the conversation, be part of our movie fan community.